Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to go over Chapter 10, Personality Disorders. It's not going to be a super long video. You're really going to still have to go through the slides by yourself and read things, but I do want to go over just some brief points that I think is important for us to talk about together. So today we're discussing Chapter 10, Personality Disorders. I uploaded a really great video, one of the crash course videos that goes through a lot of the different personality disorders that there are. I encourage you to go spend the 11 minutes and watch that. Or 15 minutes, I just saw how long it was. So when we're talking about clinical features of personality disorders, general features of personality disorders include chronic interpersonal difficulties. So that would be forming relationships with other people, problems with one's identity or sense of self, and an inability to function adequately in society. We are going to have three main clusters of personality disorders. We have cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. You will want to know that for the test. Oftentimes people with personality disorders not only disrupt their own lives, but also disrupt the lives of other people surrounding them. It makes it difficult for them to function, and it also causes a lot of problems for people that are in their lives. So cluster A has paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. One thing that's really interesting when we're talking about personality disorders is when you look at the gender rate estimates, it's a little different than what we typically see. I know as we've been going along, oftentimes we'll say that females have higher rates of incidences, but in this case, as we're looking through it, males and females often have equal rates, or males actually have higher rates of some of these personality types of disorders. So when we're talking about paranoid personality disorders, those are people that are suspicious and mistrust other people, tendency to see self as blameless, or are on guard for perceived act by others. Some other things that we see in people that have paranoid personality disorders is they find it hard to confide in people, even their friends and family. They find it very difficult to trust other people and believe they will use you for their advantage. So they believe that you're just using them to gain some type of reward in the end. They have difficulty relaxing, and they read threats and dangers into everyday situations. So they always think that somebody is out to get them and have a really hard time settling down and just being calm. When we're looking at paranoid, schizoid, schizotypal, and even antisocial personality disorder, which we'll talk about a little more in a little bit, these all qualify under a suspicious type of umbrella. These types of people tend to be more suspicious of others. Next, we move into schizoid personality disorder. One of the main features we see are impaired social relationships, inability and lack of desire to form attachments to other people. Many people with schizoid personality disorder are able to function fairly well. Unlike schizophrenia and schizotype affective disorder, they typically do not have those psychotic symptoms that we see with schizophrenia. So they might not have the delusions, hear the voices, but they still have some of the same feelings associated with those that have schizophrenia, such as finding it difficult to form relationships with other people. They choose to live a life without interference from others. They prefer to be alone with their own thoughts. They may not experience pleasure from many different activities, and they have difficulty relating to and are emotionally cold towards others. So many features that we see with schizophrenia, but like I said, we do not have the psychotic symptoms when we are talking about schizoid personality disorder. Next, we move into schizotypal personality disorder. So although every person has their own eccentricities and awkward things about them, but if that behavior and patterns of thinking make it relating to others difficult for you, that might be a diagnosis of a schizotypal disorder. Once again, unlike schizophrenia, they would not experience psychosis. However, they might have experienced distorted thoughts or perceptions, find making close relationships extremely difficult, think and express yourself in ways that others find odd, or using unusual words or phrases, making it difficult for other people to relate to you. They believe that you can read minds or that they have special powers such as a sixth sense. They feel anxious and tense with others who do not share these beliefs. So if you don't have that sixth sense or believe in the same things they do, they find it very uncomfortable to be around you and to connect with you. And they feel very anxious and paranoid in social situations. So like I said, cluster A is paranoid, schizo, and schizotypal, and those would all fall under that umbrella of being somewhat suspicious of other people. And sorry, I keep looking down. I have my own notes down here as well. So next we move into the next cluster of personality disorders. We call this cluster B. Let me find my notes here. And this includes histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. So if you look at the cluster B personality disorders, one thing I do want to point out is that if we look at the gender ratio estimate, we can see that females have higher rates than males when we're talking about histrionic types of disorders. So when we look at histrionic type, a personality disorder, we see that self-dramatization is one of the key characteristics of it, over-concern with attractiveness, tendency to be irritable, and temper outbursts if attention seeking is frustrated. So people with histrionic types of personality disorders love attention. They are all about their appearance and are very dramatic at times, which kind of makes sense that, you know, us females, we've talked about before, might be a little more dramatic sometimes than our male counterparts, which might contribute to the fact that we have higher rates of histrionic personality disorder. These type of people love receiving compliments and positive feedback about themselves and their action. If they're not getting the attention they want, they get frustrated very easily and are more likely to have an outburst. Some of the other key features that we see in histrionic personality disorder is that they might feel very uncomfortable if they are not the center of attention. They feel that they have to entertain people. They want to be what everybody is looking at. They are constantly seeking or feel dependent upon the approval of others, so they want other people to say what they're doing is correct. They want approval from their peers. They may also flirt or behave and dress provocatively in order to get that attention, especially attention from their male or female counterparts. And they get a reputation for being very dramatic and over-emotional and are oftentimes easily influenced by other people. They want the attention so badly and want to be liked so badly that they'll really conform to almost anything in order to get the attention that they're seeking. Next, we move into that narcissistic personality disorder. So here we are, males have higher incidences of females. Some of the key characteristics based on our chart is grandiosity, preoccupation with receiving attention, self-promoting, and they lack empathy. So oftentimes we're able to, when something tragic happens, we're able to empathize with people, say, I understand how you're feeling. People that are narcissists oftentimes aren't able to empathize with the people around them. Some of the other key characteristics we might see somebody from somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder is that they believe that there are special reasons that make them different, make them better and more deserving of other people. So they are special compared to everybody else and therefore should be treated that way. They do have very fragile self-esteems, and when somebody confronts them, they are more likely to lash out and get angry easily. They often feel upset if others ignore them and don't give them the attention they feel they deserve. So maybe a difference between histrionic and narcissistic is histrionic people typically want to be liked. They want the attention. Narcissistic people believe they earn that attention and should be getting it from others. They oftentimes put their own needs above others and demand that other people do so as well. So when it comes to a narcissistic, their needs are the only ones that really matter in this situation. And therefore, they are oftentimes selfish and dismissive of other people in their lives. Next, we move into antisocial disorder. So antisocial disorders, once again, we see higher rates in males. So finally, it's our time, females, to have lower incidence rates. When we're talking about antisocial behaviors, some things we see are lack of moral or ethical development, inability to follow approved models of behavior. They are oftentimes deceitful, shameless manipulation of others, and history of conduct problems as a child. So these might be people that were arrested as a youth. They get in trouble a lot. Just a moment. Briella, do you want to say hi quick? My 6-year-old would like to say hello to everybody before I continue on.
Hi.
Okay, now get out and shut the door. Take your sister with you. Oh, you want to say hi too, Cam?
Hi.
Okay, get out. Take your sister with you. Okay, sounds great. So back to antisocial personality disorder. I apologize for that. They would have been in here every 2 seconds if I didn't let them say hi. They've been so excited to do that for the past couple of days. So people with antisocial personality disorders oftentimes have that history of conduct problems as a child. So think about those ones that maybe spent a lot of time in the principal's office. Maybe they were in juvie. They oftentimes didn't listen to teachers, parents. They didn't feel like they had to follow the rules of society. Those types of behaviors followed them into adulthood. So looking at some other types of features that we're often going to see from somebody that has an antisocial personality disorder, they often put themselves in dangerous or risky situations, often without thinking about the consequences. In other words, they are also extremely impulsive. They are willing to behave dangerously and sometimes illegally. We will often see these people have a criminal record. They are often also easily bored and act on impulse. They may find it difficult to hold down a job for a long period of time. They may be really excited when they first get the job. They get kind of bored with it. They might start acting out at work, or they might just flat out stop coming or quit in order to go find a new job. We did say they have problems with empathy, and they often do things that might even hurt people in order to get what they want and meet their needs. As I said, one of the key features is also having a conduct disorder, and they need to be diagnosed with that before the age of 15. Next, we move into borderline personality disorder. So borderline personality disorder, there are equal rates between males and females. And some of the main characteristics we see with that are that they are impulsive, have inappropriate anger, drastic mood shifts, chronic feelings of boredom, and attempts at self-mutilation or suicide. One of the problems when we're talking about personality disorders and suicide rates is although they might not actually want to die, it is a way for them to get attention, and therefore we might see people have higher rates of attempted suicides under cluster B. Some other key features that we see when we're talking about borderline personality disorder is that they often feel that people are going to abandon them, and they'll do things to push them away so that they don't have to face that rejection later. They have very intense emotions that can change quickly. In other words, they might be really happy and excited in the morning, but in the afternoon, they might be really sad and down about themselves. They oftentimes do not have a strong sense of who they are or what they want from life, and often kind of question where they belong. They find it difficult to make and keep stable relationships. They have suicidal thoughts, self-harming behavior, and oftentimes they feel empty and alone, which contributes to that self-harm and suicidal behavior. They can have problems controlling the anger, and they also have problems with trusting others. This is one of those disorders that is highly comorbid. So remember, when we talk about comorbid, we mean that it is often in conjunction with another type of mental health disorder. So when we're talking about people with borderline personality disorder, oftentimes they might have anxiety, depression, eating problems, or possibly PTSD. When these people get very stressed, they may actually feel paranoid or checked out and maybe in more of a dissociative type of state like we talked about last chapter. Next, we're going to be moving into cluster C, which includes avoidant personality disorders, dependent personality disorders, and obsessive compulsive personality disorders. So when we look at cluster C, females have higher rates when we're talking about avoidant and dependent personality disorders, where males have higher rates when we talk about obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So let's start with avoidant personality disorder. Some of the key features that we feel with this is they might avoid work or social activities. That means that they have to be with other people. They expect disapproval and criticism and are often very sensitive to it. So they take those little criticisms you might make very personally, even if it more is a constructive type of criticism. They worry constantly about being rejected by other people, and they worry about being ridiculed and shamed by others as well. They avoid relationships, friendships, and intimacy because they actually fear rejection. They also feel lonely and isolated and inferior to others. They also don't like to try new things because they are worried about embarrassing themselves. Next, we move into dependent types of personality disorders. For dependent type of personality disorders, they oftentimes have difficulty in separating relationships. They don't like being alone, and they are often very indecisive. Sometimes they might even feel needy, weak, and unable to make decisions for themselves in a day-to-day types of situations without support from other people. They need other people to assume responsibility for many areas of their lives just because they have such a difficulty making decisions about themselves and worry being rejected by others and really want to keep that relationship. They agree to things that they feel are wrong or dislike just to avoid being alone. So these people might be in a really bad or unhealthy relationship, but choose to stay in that relationship just because they would rather be with somebody that treats them poorly than be alone. They have low self-confidence, and they see other people as being more capable of themselves and depending on other people more. Next, we're going to move into OCD. One thing that I want to make clear is that obsessive compulsive personality disorder is separate from obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. So OCPD is different than OCD. OCD describes a form of behavior rather than a type of personality. That being said, there are many different elements that are similar across the two. So OCD focuses more on behavior, where OCPD focuses on that personality. Similarly to OCD, OCPD involves problems with perfectionism, that need for control, and a significantly difficulty being flexible in how they think about things. So people with obsessive compulsive personality disorder are very rigid, they like control, and they're perfectionists. They need to keep everything in order and under control. They oftentimes will set unrealistically high standards for themselves and others. They think their way is the best way to do it. So maybe I have a little OCPD in me as well. They worry about themselves making mistakes, and they feel anxious if things just aren't perfect. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder is a type of personality. OCD is a type of behavior. So just make sure you know the distinction between the two. I'm going to flip through some of these slides here, see if there's anything else I want to touch on. And it is difficult to diagnose personality disorders, especially because when we're talking about the criteria, it's not as rigid as it might be for depression, anxiety, those types of disorders. So one thing that you are going to want to know is that many of the personality disorders are based within that NEO 5-factor model. So when we're talking about the NEO 5-factor model, a good way to remember it is by remembering the acronym OCEAN. So O is for openness, C is for conscientiousness, E is for extroversion, A is for agreeableness, and N is for neuroticism, which is our very first one here. So when you're looking through this, at the top it lists paranoids, personality disorder, schizoid, schizotypal, borderline. So the top row lists all the different types of personality disorders that we have. Now, as we're looking at this graph, it says neuroticism right here. And here are some of the key features that we're talking about when we're talking about neuroticism. So if we're looking at somebody that's paranoid, they are high in the area of being angry and hostile. When we look at borderline personality disorder, they are high in the facet of anxiety, angry and hostile, depression, impulsiveness, and vulnerability. So they are high in many different areas of neuroticism. If we're looking at extroversion, people that have obsessive compulsive personality disorder are more likely to be high in assertiveness, and that's really the only one they qualify under extroversion. If we're looking at histrionic, they're high in warmth, they're high in excitement seeking, and they're high in positive emotion. So remember, when we're talking about histrionic, those are the people that love attention. They love people to pay attention to them. And as we go further through, you can see openness to experience, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. So just remember, when you're looking at this graph, L's symbolize that they're low in these areas, where an H would say that they are high in these areas. So remember, obsessive compulsive, they'd be high in order, dutifulness, achievement and striving, and self-discipline, which would make a lot of sense when we're talking about people that have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They're going to be very conscientious people because they like rules, they like orders, and so forth. You can watch a video on the big 5 personality disorders, but you are going to want to know that when we're talking about personality disorders, they are rooted in that NEO Big 5 inventory. I will let you go through and learn about the causality by yourself. If you do have any questions, let me know. Oftentimes, once again, there is a lot of that biological component, but environmental component is going to be very important as well. Let you flip through those. And we talked about a lot of these key features just on the graph, but this gets a little more in depth. And I also encourage you to download the PowerPoints because I do include my personal notes on the bottom half of the PowerPoints. So make sure you go through those. So I'm actually going to flip through to where, oh no, I don't want this DVD, so let's flip through there. Just give me a second here while I flip through all of these. And just know that when it comes to personality treatments and outcomes, they can be very difficult to treat at times. One of the key factors is also going to be using some of those, treating those underlying comorbid disorders that they have. They have found some good ways to treat borderline personality disorder, some different things. So make sure you pay attention to that as you go through the treatments and outcomes section. So next we're going to move into sociopathy. So sociopathy, we're often going to think about maybe those criminals. We might think serial killers might be one of those things that come to mind. So before we would talk about sociopathic personality, we now refer it more to psychopathy. So some of the key features, according to Cleckley's criteria for psychopathy, is that there's superficial charm and good intelligence, absence of delusion and other signs of irrational thinking, absences of a nervousness or psychoneurotic manifestations. They can be unreliable. Oftentimes they'll lie and can be insincere. They lack remorse and shame. That is going to be one of the big ones that we look at, that they don't feel bad for the actions they complete. Inadequately motivated antisocial behavior, and poor judgment and failure to learn from experience. So when we think about some of our serial killers of the past, one of the things that often comes to mind is that superficial charm and good intelligence. Has anybody watched, I believe is it Dahmer that is on Netflix right now? It has Zac Efron in it. I can't remember which serial killer it is, but they often talk about how intelligent he was, how charming he was. Even when he was in the court, he could oftentimes charm the females in the room, especially the jurors. Even his own wife, didn't want to believe that he completed these serious and heinous acts. He oftentimes was able to fool her and charm her into believing that he was innocent. So it's a really fascinating show. Like I said, it's with Zac Efron. I think it's Dahmer. I could be incorrect. It could be a different one. But check it out. It's on Netflix, especially if you're interested in these types of personality behaviors and sociopathy. Some of the other criteria we see, unresponsive in general interpersonal relationships, and failure to follow any life plan. They kind of just go where life takes them. So sociopathy can best be understood by considering 4 different dimensions. So we talk about interpersonal, affective, lifestyle, and then being antisocial. So when we look here, under factor 1, we have interpersonal and affective type of relationships. So under interpersonal, like we said, they might have that superficial charm, grandiose self-worth, so they think very highly of themselves. They may think that they are better than other people, and they're pathological liars. They lie constantly. You could ask them what color the sky is, or you could tell them the color of the sky is blue, and they could argue with you about it. When we look at factor 2 or facet 2, that affective, they lack guilt and remorse, they have shallow affect, and they lack empathy. When we look at factor 2, which is social deviance, they have a couple of different areas there. So we have lifestyle and we have antisocial. So when we talk about lifestyle, they are often prone to boredom. They live a parasitic lifestyle, and they lack of realistic long-term goals. So oftentimes they're just thinking of the short term, or their long-term goals are just so out of reach and grandiose. When we look at facet 4 of antisocial, they have poor behavior controls, early behavior problems. So like we talked about before, they might fall into some of that conduct disorder type of behavior, and they might be juvenile delinquents. I'm going to let you guys look through most of this by yourself, but what I did want to point out is that there's a strong genetic influence when we talk about sociopathy. So when we look about genetic factors, they count for about 43 to 56% about variance in the dimensions of psychopathy. So about 50% of what creates a sociopath is often due to genetics. The rest are shared by non-shared environmental influences compared to shared environmental factors. So there must be something else that they experience as well that creates a sociopath. But no, it is highly hereditable. I think that is all I really wanted to touch on. I'll let you review the rest by yourself. Does anybody have any questions on the PowerPoint? Chapter 10, personality types of disorders. If you do, please let me know. I can go through some of it further. I can do shorter videos on some of the topics. But this was just a quick rundown of some of the key points you're going to want to know from this chapter, but I still encourage you to go through, read the PowerPoint, read my notes I share on the PowerPoint, and I will start working on another slide for chapter 11. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to do any office hours, if you want to meet one-on-one, let me know and I can send out an individual Zoom link and we can have a Zoom meeting together. So thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you have a good day. Thanks.